Hi, and welcome to English-Fabule. Are you learning English? Great. Let's learn English with a very interesting story. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment. Let's get started.
Why did the United States decide to go to war in Iraq in the year 2003? This is a big and important question. For a long time, many people believed the main reason was oil. They thought America wanted to control Iraq's large oil supplies. It is true that oil is important, and it played some part. But this simple idea does not tell the full story. The reasons for the war were more complex. There were several powerful men in the American government who strongly wanted to go to war with Iraq. These men had different ideas about why war was necessary. Some truly believed that Saddam Hussein, the leader of Iraq, was a big threat. They felt America had to act to protect itself. Other powerful people saw the war as a chance to make America look strong after a difficult time. They wanted to show American power around the world. This decision led to a long and costly war. It cost the lives of many American soldiers and a much larger number of Iraqi people. The United States spent a huge amount of money on the war, more than $1 trillion. The war also changed the Middle East greatly. It made the area less safe and less stable than it was before. This story will look closely at the events that led to the war. It will explain the ideas and discussions within the U.S. government. It will show how the decision to invade Iraq was made. We will learn about the reasons that were given to the public. We will also see the terrible costs and results of this war, both for America and for Iraq. Understanding why this war happened is important to understand today's world. 2. A new idea about Iraq. After the attacks on September the 11th, America was in a state of shock. People wanted to know who was responsible for this terrible event. The country was looking for a strong way to respond. Soon, people in the government who study these things found the answer. The group called Al-Qaeda, based in Afghanistan, was behind the attacks. However, even on the night of September the 11th, some important people in the U.S. government started thinking about Iraq. One of these people was Paul Wolfowitz. He was the Deputy Secretary of Defense. He sent a message asking people to look for ways Iraq might have been involved in terrorism. The intelligence people who got this message were surprised. They knew the attack came from Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan. Afghanistan and Iraq are two different countries, far apart. They had nothing to do with each other in this attack. A few days later, President Bush met with his top advisors. They met in a quiet place outside Washington, D.C. The main topic was how to hit back at Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan. But Paul Wolfowitz spoke up again. He said that the September the 11th attacks were very complex. He thought that Al-Qaeda could not have done it alone. He suggested that Saddam Hussein in Iraq must have helped them. Wolfowitz even said that Saddam was the head of the snake of global terrorism. But others in the meeting knew this was not true. The head of the Counterterrorism Center told President Bush clearly, "We were attacked on 9/11 by Osama bin Laden and al-Qaeda in Afghanistan. Saddam Hussein and Iraq has nothing to do with this." Despite this, Paul Wolfowitz did not stop. Later that day, he spoke to President Bush alone. He had a new idea, a plan. He suggested attacking Iraq. He said they could take the northern and southern parts of the country easily. He pointed out that the main oil fields were in these areas. By taking the oil, they could cut off Saddam Hussein's money. This would make Saddam weak, maybe just the ruler of Baghdad. President Bush listened. The idea of taking the oil caught his attention. He was a former businessman from Texas who worked with oil. President Bush wanted to show strength after the attacks. Hitting al-Qaeda felt difficult. Attacking a country like Iraq seemed like a clear goal. It felt like a way to do something big and important. This talk with Paul Wolfowitz seemed to plant the idea firmly in President Bush's mind. He started to see invading Iraq as a possible answer. 3. Selling the war. After the idea to fight Iraq became stronger, U.S. leaders worked for about a year. They wanted to make people in America and other countries agree that a war was necessary. The main reason they told everyone was that Saddam Hussein had very bad weapons. These were called weapons of mass destruction, or WMDs. They said these weapons were a big danger. Leaders also said that Saddam Hussein might give these WMDs to terrorist groups. This idea made many people in America very afraid of another attack like on 9/11, but maybe worse. President Bush spoke often about these dangers and the terrible weapons Iraq supposedly had. He talked about WMDs many times to show why action was needed. But some people believe that the choice to go to war was actually made much earlier, maybe right after the 9/11 attacks. If this is true, then the reasons about WMDs and giving weapons to terrorists were used later to help explain and support the decision that was already made. It was a way to make the planned war seem right and necessary to everyone. Finding clear proof that Iraq had dangerous weapons was difficult. Even international teams looked over 700 times but did not find WMDs. Still, some important people kept saying that Iraq definitely had these weapons. Dick Cheney, who was a very high leader, said clearly that there was no doubt Iraq had weapons of mass destruction. Colin Powell, who was in charge of foreign relations, spoke at the United Nations. He showed what he said was strong evidence, saying it was based on solid information. Later, people learned this information was not strong. This effort to convince people worked. Many in America began to support the idea of war. People in the U.S. government, in Congress, also started to agree. In October 2002, the U.S. Congress took a big step. Most people in Congress, including many from both main political groups, voted yes. This vote gave President Bush the power he needed to use military force against Iraq. This vote by Congress showed that the push to sell the war had been successful in Washington. The path to war was becoming clear. 4. Were there weapons? Many people at that time asked a big question. Did Iraq really have these terrible weapons, the WMDs? This question was very important. It was the main reason the U.S. government gave for possibly going to war with Iraq. Some people in the U.S. and in other countries had doubts. They were not sure if Saddam Hussein truly had these dangerous weapons. International teams called weapons inspectors went to Iraq many times. Their job was to search for these weapons. They looked in many places. These teams searched more than 700 times. But after all their work and all their searching over a long period, these international teams did not find any weapons of mass destruction. They reported that they found no such weapons. However, some important people in the U.S. government continued to say strongly that Iraq did have these weapons. They were very certain about it. For instance, the vice president at that time, Dick Cheney, spoke publicly. He said clearly that there was no doubt that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction right then. This was different from what the inspectors found. Even the Secretary of State, Colin Powell, spoke about this issue on a big world stage. He was known as an honest man. Some people thought he had doubts about the idea of invading Iraq. But he went to the United Nations, a place where countries from all over the world meet. There he gave a speech. He showed information and pictures that he said were strong proof. He claimed this proof showed that Iraq had WMDs and was actively trying to hide them from the inspectors. He told the countries at the UN that his information came from solid sources and was based on solid intelligence. But later, it became clear to many people that the proof was not strong at all. It was weak or thin evidence, not solid facts like he said. Mr. Powell later said he felt deep regret for giving this speech and presenting that information to the world. After Mr. Powell's speech at the United Nations, the argument that Iraq had dangerous weapons seemed more real to some people. Back in the United States, the Congress, which is the group of elected lawmakers, had a big decision to make. They had to vote on whether to allow the president to use military force against Iraq. On October 10, 2002, they had the vote. Many lawmakers, both from the Republican and Democratic parties, voted yes. They voted to give the president, George W. Bush, the full power to use the U.S. military to attack Iraq. This vote was a very big and important step towards starting the war. It meant the president now had the official permission he needed from Congress to start a war, based largely on the idea that Iraq had these dangerous weapons. The path to war was now much more open and clear. The focus on these alleged weapons was very strong, even though the international inspectors had searched repeatedly and could not find them anywhere in Iraq. 5. The war starts. In March 2003, the war in Iraq began. The United States and countries that helped it started their attack. Large numbers of soldiers went into Iraq. The first part of the military action was very quick. U.S. and Allied forces moved rapidly across the land. Their main goal was the capital city, Baghdad. They reached Baghdad faster than many expected. The government there could not stop them. Baghdad fell relatively quickly to the invading forces. For people watching around the world, this first phase looked like a fast and easy victory for the U.S. and its allies. It seemed very successful. About 2 months after the invasion began, in May 2003, President Bush made a visit that many remember. He went to a big U.S. Navy ship, an aircraft carrier called the USS Abraham Lincoln. The ship was near the coast. On the ship's deck, with military people around him, President Bush gave a speech. Behind where he stood, a large banner was displayed. The banner clearly stated, "Mission accomplished." This sign and the speech gave the impression that the main part of the war was finished. It suggested that the military operation had been a success and that the main job was done. Many people watching, including the public and the military, believed that the hardest and most dangerous fighting was now over. They thought the U.S. had won the war quickly. But the truth proved to be very different. While the initial invasion was indeed fast and the capital was captured, the real difficulties were just starting. The banner, "Mission accomplished," did not mean the war was over. Instead, it marked the beginning of a very long and very hard time for Iraq and for the soldiers there. The long period of problems was about to begin. 6. What went wrong? After the U.S. military entered Iraq and took control of cities like Baghdad, the first part of the war seemed quick. People thought the main fight was over. However, after this victory, serious problems began. The U.S. government and military leaders made important choices that had very bad results. One very big mistake was deciding to end the Iraqi army completely. This was a sudden decision. Hundreds of thousands of Iraqi soldiers, from officers to regular fighters, lost their jobs. They lost their pay and their normal lives. These men had many years of military training. They knew how to use weapons and fight. They were also often angry and felt shamed by the U.S. invasion and the loss of their army. These angry and unemployed former soldiers became a major problem. Many of them did not go home quietly. Instead, they joined groups that wanted to fight against the American forces in Iraq. They used their military skills, knowledge of the country, and fighting experience to make these rebel groups much stronger. Fighting against these experienced Iraqi fighters was very difficult for the U.S. military for years. One of the most dangerous groups that grew stronger because of this was Al-Qaeda in Iraq. Many former Iraqi soldiers joined this group, bringing their military training. Later, Al-Qaeda in Iraq changed its name. It became the Islamic State of Iraq. Then it became known as the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, often called ISIS. This group became very powerful, partly because it had many leaders and fighters who were trained in the old Iraqi army. Because of these bad decisions, like ending the army and not having a good plan for what happened next, Iraq became very unstable and dangerous. Instead of peace and building a new country, there was a lot of violence and fighting. The country was in chaos for years. The U.S. spent a huge amount of money trying to stop the fighting that came from these mistakes. This cost was over $1 trillion. The war also caused many people to die. Thousands of American soldiers died in the years after the invasion. Hundreds of thousands of Iraqi people also died because of the violence and chaos. Saddam Hussein was a bad leader and killed many of his own people over 25 years. But the war that the U.S. started and the problems that followed led to even more deaths and trouble in a shorter time. Removing the Iraqi government and ending its army left a big empty space for power across the country. This empty space allowed bad groups like ISIS to grow strong very quickly and take control of large parts of Iraq. The war, which some leaders started wanting a quick win after 9/11, led to many years of violence and problems. This part of the story shows how bad choices after a war can have very serious effects and make things much worse than planned. 7. The price of war. The war in Iraq did not stop after the first quick fight. It went on for a very long time, lasting for many years. This long period of conflict had a very high price for everyone involved. For the United States, the war was extremely expensive. The total money spent went over $1 trillion. This was a huge cost for the American people and government. The human cost for the United States was also very sad. Nearly 10,000 American military people died during the years the war continued in Iraq. They were soldiers and other service members. For the people of Iraq, the number of deaths was much, much larger. It is thought that over 200,000 Iraqis were killed. This includes civilians and fighters caught in the violence. The war caused immense suffering for families. Before the war, Iraq was ruled by Saddam Hussein. He was a very cruel dictator. Over about 25 years, his rule led to the deaths of many Iraqis, possibly around 250,000 people. But the war started by the United States brought even more death, injury, and terrible chaos to Iraq in a shorter amount of time. Life became very difficult and dangerous for ordinary Iraqis. When Saddam Hussein and his government were removed, it left a large, empty space in power across the country. There was no strong group in control. This situation is called a power vacuum. This time of no clear power allowed very dangerous groups to grow strong. One group that became very powerful during this unstable time was ISIS. They were an extremist group that caused great violence. The decision to start the war might have come from fear after the attacks on America, or maybe from a wish by some leaders to look like strong heroes who could fix problems fast. But the actual results were very bad. The war did not bring peace or make Iraq a better place quickly. Instead, it led to terrible problems, continuing violence, and the rise of new threats. The price paid for starting this war was incredibly high. It cost a huge amount of money. More importantly, it cost many, many human lives and caused deep pain and instability that lasted for years. This was the heavy price of the conflict. 8. Lessons from Iraq. Looking back now, we can see more clearly why the war in Iraq started. It was not just for oil, as some people first thought. A small group of powerful people in the U.S. made the main choices. Their ideas were based on information that was not certain or even wrong. Also, after the terrible attacks on September 11th, they wanted to show how strong America was to the world. They wanted a big action after the attacks. But the war had big and long-lasting effects. For the people of Iraq, life changed greatly. For the countries around Iraq in the Middle East, the area became less safe and stable. And for how America acts with other countries, the war changed things too. These effects were mostly not good for anyone. This story of the Iraq War shows important things we should learn. It shows how being afraid after an attack can lead to bad decisions. It shows how making mistakes in thinking about other countries can cause trouble. It shows how wanting a quick, clear win, like in a game, can start a real fight that is not needed and causes much sadness and death. The war in Iraq was very costly in many ways. The biggest cost was the loss of life. Many American soldiers died. Even more, hundreds of thousands of Iraqi people died. The country of Iraq became much less safe than before the war. Because the old government was removed so quickly, bad fighting groups started. One of these groups grew into ISIS, which became a very dangerous organization. The money spent on the war was also huge. It cost America more than $1 trillion. This money could have been used for many other things. The leader of Iraq, Saddam Hussein, was a cruel ruler who hurt his own people for many years. But the war started by America brought more death and confusion in a shorter time. The idea some leaders had that America would be seen as a hero for starting this war did not come true in the end. It is very important for people to think about these events. We need to understand what happened and why, so we can learn from it. When powerful people make decisions about war, they must be very careful. They need true and clear information, not just ideas they wish were true. They must not let fear or a wish to look strong make the choice to fight. What do you think is the most important lesson from the war in Iraq for you? Learning from history helps countries and people not repeat mistakes in the future. The Iraq War is a sad example of what can happen when things go wrong at the top levels of government.
Hey there! Just a second before you go. If you learned something new today, please give this video a like, write your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to the channel. It only takes a second, and it really, really helps to create even better English videos for you. Your support means the world. Thank you.